All right, we're back. We are COMP125 in the summer 2018 semester at Centennial, client-side web development. Yeah, the last lecture. It's week 13, part 2. I'm going to try and I didn't have a chance to put up a lab today. The rain really slowed me down, right? Well, it's just more times you get a chance to practice, right? That's what it is, right? So, yeah, so that was really weird. But anyways, I just want to recall what we did yesterday a little bit. We had a project up on GitHub that we were using. So if I go to GitHub, and if we go to Centennial, the project that we were using yesterday was COMP125 S2018 lesson 13. And you can see that, we tagged it as a Node and Express, an Express generator kind of app. And that's true. And I've just brought it up here in Visual Studio Code. And if I was to run this thing again, so I'm just going to kind of bring up the terminal, integrate terminal, and just use NodeMon. And that's going to allow me to go localhost 3000 and do the Express demo, which is where we're at, right? We talked a little bit about how the Express generator scaffolds out the application. And, in the past, when I've done these kinds of demos for different courses, students would ask, well, why don't you just build it yourself, right? And yeah, you could, totally, right? So you'd have to kind of install all the stuff, some of it. I mean, this part was done by me, but there's a bunch of stuff here that is done automatically. One thing we were missing from our package.json that we've included last week is today I'm going to put this up on Heroku, and maybe we can do it on Azure today. Let's see how it goes. We definitely want to put our engines, right? So if I go to kind of engines, right? I think that's important to kind of, what happened there? Maybe I have to put in a thing. Let's undo that change. That was really bizarre. Engines. Yeah, okay. It means that I'm doing it wrong. One more time. Engines. There you go. And we're going to have our Node version. We talked about this. What's our Node version? And we also found out from last week that Node version 10.0.0 or something like that was no good, right? So if we look back at last week's lesson 12, we had to modify it for Microsoft Azure because it wouldn't run the latest version, right? So a package.json file from last week, if you look, we had to reduce our Node version to 10.0.0 and our NPM version to 6.1, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to grab those things. This is just right off of my last week's repository. And I'm just going to replace this little part here with that. So kind of do one of those. It's important to put this stuff in here because this tells your provider, specifically Heroku and Microsoft Azure, because we're going to do that today, what version of Node and NPM we need to use. So this is this part. Okay, so I'm going to save that. That's something we have to kind of put into play. And I'm going to put that up on Azure, on GitHub. So I'm going to go here and say updated package.json, right? We're going to actually click this little plus button, click this little check mark, and then from there, we're going to go to push, and that should push everything up to GitHub with the latest version. So this we go. We just updated our project a little bit. What I wanted to do today, before we put everything up online, is I wanted to demonstrate really briefly how to do views and how to break up views with the view engine, where I have both partials and content files, right? So for this, I want to kind of make a new folder called partials. We've done before, and I want to make another folder called content, right? Just like we've done. So it's content and partials. We know how this works, right? A couple of things I don't like about this project also is notice that I have public here, and then I have routes and views, and I have my server and my app and all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of out in the wild. And I like to partition or kind of separate it between public and server. or client is what public means. Think about the public as the client side stuff, right? And everything on the other side, the views and the routes, are all the server side stuff, right? So you could separate it that way as well. And I've done it in the past in different courses. Today, not going to happen. I want to make this stuff work, this content and partials. I'm going to work really, really hard to try and make that we have one nav bar like we've talked about before, and a header and a footer for all of our stuff. Okay, so we'll have to think about how to do that in a second. So one of the things when you create a partial file is, let's take a look at EJS. So EJS, so embedded, if I go EJS again, if I go to that, it'll take us to embedded JavaScript, embeddedjs.com, right? Remember that it gives us a little bit of documentation on how to do stuff. And one of the things we want to do is do an include statement. So if I go to documentation for EJS up here, one thing I've never liked is the way they kind of separate out their docs. They're not great, for EJS. I think that's one reason why they moved away from EJS and went towards Pug as an example. If I was to type in something like, include, right, it's not going to really do what I want. Like, it's going to kind of go through here and trying to figure this out. So sometimes even on the EJS website, the embedded JS website down in here, documentation, not great, right? I'm just being honest with you. I'm telling you that, right? So again, if I clicked here, you can see that I got this. If I click on source, there's not much here. Project, there is some here. Here's some typical uses. They talk about view helpers and examples and blah, blah, and error handling, but that's really not going to help us much, right? Again, if I go back to the original project, which is here, and there isn't really a getting started guide. It tells you some highlights. Here's a getting started right here, how to learn EJS. And it talks about how to do certain things with HTML and embed EJS in there, right? So it talks about a lot of stuff, how to, the same things we've seen from yesterday, right? With things like view helpers and error handling and blah, blah, blah. But one thing it doesn't really tell you to do, too good is how to include files. So if I was going to guess, let's just take a look here. If I said something like, I want to include EJS file, right? How do I do that? There's another little site here, embedded JavaScript templates. Let's see what that does for us, EJS. And let's see if there's some documentation on getting started. npm install EJS. Yes, yes, yes. That's like the actual, just EJS by itself, not Express, right? And this is, again, would be on the, you notice there's a script tag, and you'd use this on the front end. That's interesting. That's what it looks like, right? So if I go to docs and, I want to look at some of the options here, right? So escape and async, and this is interesting. This is really good because it tells you how it works. Less than % is a scriptlet, so you can actually include control flow, that kind of stuff. Less than % and underspace, white space slurping. Less than % and equal sign outputs the value into the template, right? Left sign. Left than % minus outputs the unescaped value, and so on, right? So this is pretty cool. This is the ending, and there's a bunch of other ones. So this is good. Now here, I can do an include like this, but I'll tell you that this is incorrect. It won't work properly like this. All right, this will work nicely if you want to do something like on the front end, but it won't work with the stuff that we want to do on the back end. Now this is interesting, where it says include header. This is the kind of stuff I want to do, include header, and you're going to see when we actually see what I just want to show you the syntax if I can find it, how simple it really actually is. It's not really as bad as what we think, right? So it's almost like you put include, and let me just show you this not include partial file. I just want to show you the syntax, and then you can see it. This is actually in the body. And I want to show include, maybe I've just include EJS files inside another EJS file. really what we need to do. Include partial. There it is. Including a partial. Yeah. So that's what it shows, percent, but really this would work if you did this, include myview.ejs, right? I mean, literally all you have to do is this part. The percent signs, these greater than and less than, only apply to your template itself, like inside the actual template. And we're going to do it before the template hits. So it's almost like I want to include and that partial by itself. Notice this is there's a negative in here complete, but that's what the kind of stuff I want to do. So going back into there to test it, let's do that. Let's make a partial called header. So I can make a new partial called header.ejs, and I'll go to the index.ejs file that I have. And I kind of like what they've done here, but this is an incomplete. I find that this is kind of an incomplete header. I don't like it. There's no meta tags. None of the stuff that I like. So what I'm going to do is just down in here. First, I'm going to switch from EJS to HTML. And down in the bottom here, I'm just going to type in HTML and press HTML5. So that's going to give me the header I want, this part. That's what I really want, right? I'm going to copy and paste it up there for a second. So this head is really what I want, this part here. So this all the way up to here, the doc type. So cut that out. And I want to get all this part. That stuff is what I wanted. I want all this stuff inside my. Every document should have a character set, a viewport, all that stuff that we're used to having, right? This stuff is good, style sheet and bootstrap and all that stuff. This is right on, right? When we do this kind of stuff. Title should be title, sure. I'm okay with that for now. I don't need this part right now. So that was the trick I used, just to use Emmet to get me that information instead of typing it freehand. So what I really want to do is in my header, I only want to include the stuff that's in the head. Okay, so I can actually take all of this stuff. This is new. This is different than what we did in Ajax, right? And anything else, for example, my nav bar. So let's put my nav bar in here before we continue. I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to go to Get Bootstrap. So let's go to Get Bootstrap. And I want to get my nav bar like we've normally done. So I'm going to go to my documentation. I'm going to go to components. Again, we've done this a number of times. Here's my nav bar. I probably could copy paste for another project, but I'm going to do it this way. Copy, go back in here and paste, right? In fact, one more time. What I'll do instead is I'll put a header just to be right on, right in there. Then I'll format everything. So let's just say format document. There we go. So now that's all nicely formatted, except for this part, which we're going to see is something that is EJS. That's why it came out like this. Title back. There we go. Okay. And then, of course, I want to rename the navbar brand as kind of Express Demo. And I want to go through the regular things that we've done. So where it says this span, I want to get rid of the span because I don't usually use that. Actually, I'm not sure if I like the formatting. And I don't want to mark this as active because I want to do that with code, which I'll show you how to do. Right? So there's li nav item and then home. I do want to put in a I tag, which is with a class. Let's just use that class of fa-home, fa large. We've done that before. That's font awesome, with a bit of a space between the home and the home link, right? And I'm going to do about and contact because of those 3 pages that I want. Okay, so just to make it easy, I'm just going to delete that and delete all this. Again, I'm just formatting it the same way we've done it before. Nothing new here, guys. And yeah, and what I want to do is when I take the single link, which is kind of formatted the way I want it, and put it in there, right? So this is my nav link. And, just to be safe, actually, one more thing. What I want to do is in the list item where it says nav item, I also want to classify this list item as home. So I want to kind of say the ID is also home, my home ID. And maybe what I'll do is I'll make it so it's home as in capital H. We'll see. We might change that later. And then I'll have an ID and a class. So I have two ways to connect to this thing. I'll call this about, and this will be about. And then this will be a kind of an info. Things we've done before. Like, again, nothing that's really shocking or new for you guys at this stage, right? I'll reformat everything in a second. And this will be contact, my navbar. And again, I'll make this contact. And we'll change the info to not message. What is it called? Comment. Okay. So all the tags are correct. Let me just move this and format it just a little bit without clicking the format button right now. And I think we're going to have a pretty good nav bar, which we need to test. The links, that's the other thing. The links are going to be weird because I want to go to my home page, and there is no, remember like we talked about before? There is no home page. There is no index.html. There is no about page. So we're going to just put a slash home. So we're going to say something like, okay, when I go to slash, right, or slash home, one of those two things, I'm going to go to the home, my home link or my home page, right? And when I do the same thing with about and the same thing with contact, those are my routes, right? My nav bar, same thing. What I want to kind of do is when I click on Express Demo, I want to go to slash. So I want to kind of go to the root, if you will. Let's see if that works. So some basic, routing. H1 tag could definitely show my title. Okay, I want to say my title. Sure, and welcome to just a test for now. And what I want to do is test it out the way it is, just as it is, and see what we got going on. Right. So now we should see a nice nav bar that we never saw before. Again, similar to what we've done in the past. So let's take a look at that. So going back to here, and if I refresh, you're going to see this nav bar, but something's not right. What's wrong with it is, first of all, it's not the color that I like. So that's why I'm testing it before I put in all the details. I'm going to make it dark. And again, I'm using the dark theme. You can use whatever theme you want. That's all possible as well. And the other thing is that I have this content app.css, which is messing my CSS up. So I want to kind of mess that up, fix that. So I'm going to go to under public, under content, under app.css. You can see that there's some CSS. Just going to wipe all this out for now because I don't need it. And I'll just put in a comment that says some CSS here, which I don't have any right now because I'm wiping it out. So kind of updating my package, refresh. There we go. It's something similar to what we've seen before. And so it works. So you can see that I have my route. So if I click home, there is no home route, right? We have to fix that. And if I go to about, there is an about route. And if I go contact, there is a contact route for now. Okay, so I got to fix my home route. So going back into my routes under index.js, you can see now that I have this slash, right? And it's like I want to have another route, right? So this is one option if it's this. And I could just make it this whole thing happen again, where whether it's that route or this route where it says slash home, those two places point to the same thing. And this kind of says that maybe I could have a controller, some kind of function that I call that's exactly the same because it's duplication, right? That's one way of doing it. The other way to do it is just to be safe with it. Is what I could do is inside of my index.ejs is I can just change my route. So this is okay, but this is not. So I'll say something like this, right? That works as well. And when I go back, if I go home now, it's gonna. Did I refresh it? I have to reboot. Sorry, it doesn't detect stuff. That's one thing you'll notice, that it doesn't detect things on the EJS side, right? So again, if I go here, that'll work. And I believe this is good. And that's good now, right? And we're good to go. So all these links work. They're just not showing up as which one I'm at. They don't show me my breadcrumbs, like almost like, hey, I'm at home, I'm at about, I'm at contact. We're going to fix that. And I want to include this nav bar as well as the header portion of my files in every file. So I want to do that include. So this is where I want it to stay. I want it to be in the header. So my partial, in this case, is going to include all this stuff, all of this stuff, including my nav bar. So I want to kind of do one of these. I want to kind of cut this out. So the header and the whole head part of my document, I want to cut it out like this. Nothing else is in here. And I want to put it inside the header of my file. So this is my header. Okay. And inside of my index page, I want to kind of put this include, right? So again, what I want to do is kind of, and if I go back to EJS formatting, so I go back to EJS for a second. Here's EJS. I want to almost do an include. I want to kind of just like literally do something like an include like this, right? And I want to include the partial file. I want to kind of do an include. And this isn't the right syntax, but I want to show you what this does. I want to show you the errors first, okay? So I want to include inside partials. So again, where is partials relative to my index? Right now, my index is in the root of my views, right? So where it's going to go is it's in /partial. So it's going to be /partials and then /header.ejs. That's where I want it to go. So that's what I want to include. So I'm going to save that. And if I was to make this mistake, so if I go back to about, we're good. If I go back to this, and if I refresh, you can see that I get this, right? I'm showing you so you see the error, right? So this isn't right, okay? So we need to put it inside the syntax that we saw. So if you look at it, remember we saw the syntax online where it's like %. And if I just do this, just those two things, I'm saying, hey, include this. That's a directive, right? If I just did this part, and if I refresh, I got nothing, right? But I don't even have that problem anymore. The problem goes away. So it's almost like I want to include, like do one of these, save it, and if I refresh, then I want to be able to see that file. Now notice that I don't get any errors. I'm not getting any errors. And if I look at if I inspect, if I go back to my console, I get F started. So there's no errors here, all right? And this is where people get confused. If I go to view source, what do I got? I got nothing. I got no head at all. Like it didn't include anything. It didn't work, right? This part failed to load kind of thing, right? However, where you can also look is the console. So if I go back to my console and if I want to see what it says here, so I'm going to bring up the console so you can see this. So it says, okay, blah, blah, blah. I went to Bootstrap. I went Font Awesome. That stuff was good from before. And then, well, Content App CSS was before. And now I'm back to this part. Like it hasn't done anything else since. So this is the stuff it's done so far. And the only way we can get this part here, this part, that's the last thing I did. But there's this other part that says 304 / and it says nothing updated, right? So remember what we can do with NodeMon is we can reboot. We can restart NodeMon with an RS command anytime we want, right? So now we've rebooted NodeMon. And if I go back to this and restart, just do that. I want to see. So this is after we rebooted NodeMon. That's why I did it. So you can see the command. It's getting a 304 for this part, right? And we're getting these two little dashes. And that means like, okay, milliseconds, took 18 milliseconds to load the page, but I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting actually my load. I'm getting nothing. Yeah, I'm just pointing this out to you guys. Going back to our example online that we saw, right? And I'm going to some of the examples that we saw that showed us how to include stuff, right? So again, include partials, navigation.ejs. This is what we saw, right? And if you notice, going back to ours, my index.ejs, I didn't quite do that, did I? So this. But if I was to do this, okay, and here's header.ejs, make sure it's spelled correctly, so save. Make sure my header is saved. That's important too, right? And if I was going to go to, that might have been it too. If I refresh, now we got it. So now it's included. That part, the whole header, is included inside my file. So let's do that /. Maybe that was the problem. So I'm going to go into /. Again, this is just troubleshooting. So I'm going to include /. Use the routing, the pathing mechanism that we know. So refresh. So good. So it was just the fact that I hadn't saved. Nothing tells you that you haven't saved. Nothing. There's no errors. It just doesn't show up, right? And that's a problem for some people. They're like, wait a minute, I don't know why, but my nav bar doesn't show up. So it's working because I didn't save my header.ejs. And I can't tell. I don't know unless I see my files. It's just the way it worked out, right? Nothing tells me there was a mistake. There's no mistake, right? My header.ejs was actually loading, but it was empty. Yeah. It does matter. Because if I put this, remember we tried this, if I do this, if I take it away and go back, then you're going to see, sometimes what is happening is you'll see that it comes up blank, right? I recommend putting the hyphen in because it says you take it raw, whatever it looks like. And this is pretty good. The syntax you missed, we talked about it earlier, which is the percent by itself is a directive, and the percent minus is almost like raw input or whatever. So that's why they recommend online, which is what we're going to use. Okay, so this kind of implodes it here, and now I have this bottom part, the body, and I want to include this part, the scripts, all the time too, right? Because that's always going to be the same. Look how much my content is right now. It's just this, right? But this part right here is the body, and this part I always want to include, including all the JavaScript stuff. Why not? I don't want to always load the JavaScript. I want it to be loaded once, whenever I need it, right? So I want to grab this part. This is part of my footer, as well as some kind of footer. If I want, I can include that here too. For now, though, let's just pull this in. So this just part in. So I'm going to kind of cut this out, save it, and I'm going to go back to my partials and make a new file, which I'm going to save this time, I swear. We're going to call this footer.ejs, right? And paste it in there and save that. And what I want to do in my index.ejs, this file right here, right, is I want to do the same include, but I want to include footer.ejs, right, at the bottom. And that's my file. That's my template now. It's like so simple, right? By the way, this should harken back to those people who've ever done PHP, the stuff that you're going to do with next semester with .NET. It's going to be like this.
There's no PHP.
Well, there should be PHP because PHP is everywhere. You shouldn't discount PHP. Okay. But if you look back here, as an example, you can see that this little file that we have in here is kind of very similar to what we need. So header and footer. And if I go back to this and refresh, we should see no difference. And if I look at the actual page source, you can see we still have the scripts added at the end, right? So here's the top part, here's the bottom part. So what's happening is we're composing the HTML file by smashing together the partial header and partial footer, and this is the content piece, okay? So what I really need to do is move these EJS files for about, contact, and index into my content folder. Let's do that next. So again, I'm going to kind of move close my partials down, and we have to change this because it won't be ./partials. It'll be ... right? It'll look like this. So go up one, and then inside partials. So I'm going to save this one, and I'm going to take this file EJS and put it inside my contents. We need to change some stuff. We need to change the routing too. So I'm going to put this back in here too. And we'll go this inside here too. We're just compartmentalizing like we've done before. We'll leave the error out here for a second. And inside my content now is my about, contact, and index. And we've done it for my index, but I want to do the same thing for my about. So my about page, the header is the exact same. So this is this, right? That's not going to change. And in my footer, that's going to be the same. So I'm going to go back to my index and grab my footer. You're going to see how they look now. The templates are going to be actually much cleaner, right? So there's my footer. And the same thing goes with my my contact, right? So I'm going to grab my contact. Oops. My contact. I want to grab this part. and go to my contact page and wipe all that stuff out because I don't care about all this stuff, right? So, and then I want to go into the bottom where my index and do the same thing. What's the benefit? Well, the benefit is I can have the same exact header and footer, right? And the only content page is right here. That's the content. So this and this is always the same, but this is different. That's right. And then I can have one header, one nav bar that goes through all pages like we've done before, like Ajax, but now it's being done on the back end, not on the front end. Before it was done with Ajax on the front end. Now it's being done on the back end, where we're injecting our nav bar and we're injecting everything from the back end. And this is kind of a way it's being done. We see this a lot more than the other way that I showed you. Both ways are valid. So this is good, but my routing needs to change because now my routing is wrong. So if I go to my route, so this is faster actually. This is much faster. Yeah, you'll see that there's no delay. So if I go here to my routing, this is wrong because it says, hey, I left to look in my index, but that's not right. There is no index anymore. It's inside of content. So it's content index, right? You got to be careful here because this is what we're saying. We're also saying, look at content about. We look at content contact, right? So that's our routing, right? So we'll save that file. I think we've saved everything. I think everything is up to date. And let's go back and see if it works. Like this is the thing we need to check. So now if I click on About, I'm going to see my About page, right? I got to fix this. Go to my contact page is there. It's all using Bootstrap, you can see, because everything has been updated in terms of our style as well. It's not exactly perfect because obviously you can see that they're right at the edge. I haven't put any containers. Let's add them in. So again, in my index, my index page. So again, my content. Now I can just look at my content page, right? I don't care about my partials right now. All I care about is my content. I can manage my content. So by going into my index page, all I care about is this part. That's all I care about, which is so much more manageable than was before, right? Before I had all this other stuff that was repeated over and over again. I don't have to repeat myself. I just do it once, right? So going back in here now, what I can do is I can say, hey, I want to put a div tag. And again, this is EJS. Hold on a second, guys. I can put a div tag down here. I'm just changing when I change from HTML, I change it to, from EJS to HTML, right? And if I go div tag, just press on it, click on it. Yeah. If I press div with a class of container, that's what I want, right? And inside my container, again, you can have a Jumbotron, the same thing that we had before. For now, we just want to put the container that wraps around everything. So when I take this and put it here, okay. Now, guys, you can take this one step further, right? I can do a switch, and I can switch it on title. I can do all kinds of stuff like we did before, and only have one template to do all the content if I really want to, right? I mean, you can be really creative here with what you can do, right? If you want to concentrate, instead of having all these files, we could have one, right? Or two, if it's really different. But this idea of the div container and stuff, I want to do that with all of them. So again, going back to contact, I want to put all this stuff in a container, kind of stuff, right? And same thing with my about page. Put that in the container. It looks a little better. And I want to show you some other stuff because this is just this stuff, right? This solves these problems, right? These solves the initial problems we had, right? So if I go to home, now you can see it's kind of spaced out a little bit. My about page, it's over here. Contact page, all the stuff we did before, and they're similar to what we did. But this part is not switching anymore. So, Riaz, what was your question?
I think that using this method, we can actually just place the actual content required in the specific pages and let it go on. Maybe we can put any number of, like, include any number of include. Oh,
yes, of course. You can put as many includes as you want. Like, I can include, if I wanted to, I can have another folder that's templates. And my templates folder, I can call up my main template, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it index. Call it whatever you like, right? And then my main template or my home template or whatever you want to call it, right? I include my header, my partial, and my home content. And my content comes from the content folder, not like the way I have it here, right? So my content doesn't include, it's some other file, a template that includes the content, right? Again, you can go crazy and do as many includes as you want.
But I can, for the same page, like without the content, I
Yeah.
can include like as many as possible.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you can do that. Now, the challenge is the pathing. I'm just going to put it up there, right? Because right now, we're only one level deep, right? But if I go multiple levels, this might screw us up. So I'm just putting it out there. There's things you have to work out with the pathing, but that's easily changed and fixed. So I want to fix this problem with my my switching. And I did it last time with front-end JavaScript, right? Where right now, you notice that the title, right, is being injected. Right, so if I go to my routes, if I'm smart about my routes, and if I look at my index.js, you can see that the title that I'm injecting, right, is about Express. That's the title, right? And that same title is the thing that's coming in different places. Contact me, about Express. If you look back at this, you can see that this, and if I go here, about Express comes up, and if I click here, contact comes up. And it's really quick. You see that it was something else, and then all of a sudden switched around, right? Because we're using this whole idea of a single page application again, right? Where we have one page really, and it's just reloading parts of the page when we need it. And notice that the pathing is different. If I was to actually put contact.html, that's not going to find. There's no contact.html. Just like before, just like Ajax, it's exactly the same, right? Gives us our 404 page, but there's nothing really there that shows us this kind of stuff. So going back to this, that's not what I wanted. Going back to this, you can see that contact is something we want to switch on. We can switch on this, contact me. We could do that. But again, we're also passing in some information. We're passing this information into both the header.ejs file as well as into the main file, right? That's where it's going. And that's how the header's working. So the way this routing works is, hey, I want to go into content index. All right, so I'm looking at the index file. So this is how it works. So I'm just gonna close these down just to make it a little easier to see for a second. So again, I'm going to go to content index. So content index, here's my index file, right? And then the index file says, hey, go load this first. So then it's going to go into my partials, into my header, and it says, hey, I need a title in here. I need a title. Give me that title, right? And you can see that the title is going to be the element, the title element in the head of the head node of my document is going to take that title information that's coming from my route right here, right? Because my route title is going to be what this title is, okay? Now, you got to figure that if I can pass information into the header, right, I can also pass information into, the way for me to switch. For example, if my title, my document.title is something like this thing, I can do it on the front end or the back end. It's up to you. I'll leave it to you how you want to do it. But I want to show you how to do it with EJS. I showed you how to already do it with JavaScript. My JavaScript file is blank. I could use JavaScript for this too, right? And switch those things, because really what I'm doing is JavaScript is loading after all the content is coming in, right? So I could use JavaScript to do the same thing that I'm going to do here with EJS. But I could do that up in the title as well. So back up in the index.ejs page or the header, right? I'm coming in here and I'm saying, okay, header, I want this list item here, this list item, right? Well, remember, I can do an if statement because I can use EJS in here, right? So I have total control over this list item if it's active or not, right? And I can check, and my ID is home, my ID is about, my ID is contact. That I can hook into that with front-end JS if I want to, right? That's why I put these here, just in case you wanted to do that, like you have already in your code. But I could do it the EJS way as well, where I say, well, if my title is home, then show nav item active, right? Else, show this. That's an option, right? So how that works is I have to make sure that my title is passed through. But I do have my title. My title is right here, right? My title. I have this information. I don't have to do document.title anymore. Document.title is actually being passed to me through my object, right? Which is right here. So I can test that. I can say, well, if it's this, if it's equal to this, then do it, right? I could also do a switch case if I really wanted to in here too. In the past, I don't believe EJS included switch case at all. Remember, because EJS is a limited subset of JavaScript in terms of what it can do. So the way it would work is I put in a %, and I can say if, it's conditional statements, right? If my title, right, is exactly equal to express, I think demo is when I made it. If that's the thing, then I open this up, right? And just like I would normally do, I would want to close this up because I have to have, remember that my curly braces have to be, they have to be enclosed in EJS syntax, right? So this has to close, right? So this opens EJS syntax, this closes EJS syntax, right? That's what it does. And I do if my title is da-da-da. And then what I want to do is put this in there. And so that's what I want to say, where my ID is home and my nav item is active. Right? Else, right? I could say else if, and then, or just put else, maybe else. And then, because it's not going to be really a thing, I can just open that up. And then do one of these. Okay. So now, what does this do? What I'm actually saying is, I'm only going to render one of these list items, right? There's two options, right? I can render this one, or I can render this one. But I won't render both of them. It's either one, if, else, the other one, right? And then I'm always going to render this part. That's going to happen no matter what happens. I'm always going to put the link in there, right? This isn't going to change. And I'm always going to do this part. But these parts are conditional, right? So let's try just for one first. So going back, I can go back to here. And if I refresh, you know, this is not the home. If I click on the home page, now you can see that my home it's active, right? And so I can do the same thing. And this is like one way of doing it. There's another way of doing it as well. Okay. Actually, there's many ways of doing it, but I can kind of do the same thing. I can kind of switch on what it says. So I can kind of go in here. And if my title this time, instead of express them, I think it's about me. You can be very specific, whatever you want it to be. And if I want to check it out, I can do that in my router, because my router itself has everything. Here's my router. So express demo, about express, sorry, I was wrong, and contact me, right? So about express. And just to kind of finish that off, I'm just going to do it all at once. Here is contact me, so I don't forget. All I'm doing is composing right now, so just bear with me, right? And what I want to do is do this other part. So I want to kind of do this part, right? So, and this part. And I want to grab this item and put it in there and change my nav item to active in here. Right? So I'm writing two possibilities. One list item that looks like this, and the other one that looks like this, but you have to change, depending on what the title is, the title value is, it's going to check and swap it. I'll do the same thing for here. So again, I'll do one of these. So I'll say that I want this part. And I want this part. And I want to take this part, cut it out, and put it in here, and over here. And I want to put active here and make sure that that is correct. I think I didn't screw anything up. And we'll just tab it in so it looks like it's properly formatted. Would this one be in here and this one be in there? And I think that's good, right? So it looks a little bit busier, but actually what I've done is all my conditional stuff that I would do with front-end JavaScript, I'm doing on the back end. That's all I'm saying. And EJS allows that opportunity for us to do that. It's another option. You can combine both things, front-end and back-end, right? So going back, if I did it correctly, just make sure everything's saved. If I refresh, then I'm home, and if I click on About, I'm on About. If I click on Contact, I'm good. Now I have the same effect that I had on the front end, I'm doing on the back end. Questions around this? Again, I can use conditional statements, so I can swap in and out different parts of each HTML, because think about these things as not complete pages. All right, I don't want you to think about these EJS pages as complete pages. They're not complete pages in any way. They're just templates. And all I'm doing is I'm injecting the information I want from both the header and the footer and the stuff that I'm putting in the template. And then it's composing the page afterwards. There's a composition stage that happens afterwards, where it takes all that information and composes your new HTML page, an actual HTML page. And that happens after the fact. Okay? But this is all this, but this is not, I don't have a synchronization problem at all, right? Where we do have a synchronization problem with Ajax. Remember all that waiting for it to load? We don't have to think about that anymore, right? Yes.
So for we are specifying the hard-coded data, what we can like from the front end, from users,
of course.
from the back end,
yeah, there's so many ways to do the same thing, right? Yeah, if I want to, I can, instead of doing it this way, I can just write a little piece of code that says on title, same thing like we did last time, switch it from the front end, right? So we can use the front end JavaScript to adjust the back end stuff. Remember that the page will eventually render as an HTML page, right? Somehow it's going to happen, right? And then it's happening where we get this data that's happening on the front end. This is the great thing, though. It looks like these pages have all been made statically, not dynamically the way I'm making them. So a good example of that to look at is, let's take a look at let's inspect it a little bit. If I go view page source, looks like this is the way the page is. Look, there is no if statements or anything like that. Those are not here because they're not being composed in here. It only composes pure HTML, right? That's all it does. And you can see it just injects the pieces that we need to compose our page. That's what it does. So that's the power of the view engine. Power of view engine is allows us to manipulate the view and create our front end experience. So it's pretty popular. People do this. They make an Express site like this, and they have a lot of control, and they can use Bootstrap to make it responsive and all that kind of stuff, right? So I can kind of still do this, and I can still have the same functionality that I did before, right? All that same stuff. The routing and everything else is perfect. There's no issues. So it'll work on mobile devices and all that kind of stuff, and everything. It looks modern. And from a user perspective, they can never tell that you're running it on EJS. They wouldn't know. They just know that, hey, it's like cool. One thing that's different is this part. The URL is weird because it doesn't show HTML, but who cares, right? Because this is modern, kind of URLs look like this anyway, right? And you can do whatever else you want. I'm not going to go into more of a detail in terms of HTML because that's not the exercise here. But this should give you enough to do your assignment. Assignment number 4 now is pretty much, it should be very clear what you need to do, right? I've actually done it for you. Right? If you think about the routing and the setup and everything else, it's exactly what I want you to do for the setup. Just basically what you do for assignment 4 is use the Express generator to do your app first and then inject all the data you need. I do not want you to use Ajax, right? That would be another further complication because what's going to happen is Ajax will wait for the page to load and then you can inject content. I don't need you to do that. No, it will work all the time. It's just that you have to know when. Oh, no, it'll always work. It just may not work the way you want it to work. Well, the back end, it just gives you another option, right? It gives you different ways of doing things. And if we used Angular as a good example, right, instead of Angular being a front-end framework, you do all the things on the front end again. You wouldn't do anything on the back end. This is all back end stuff. Like we're literally using the back end to render our pages, right? A little bit old school compared to what we do nowadays with the front end. We do a front end framework to do our pages, right? But you should know about how to do this, right? Because you can create a really neat site, a decent site, very responsive site, and you can inject any data that you want by using EJS. or Pug, or Handlebars, or whatever view engine you feel like using. Okay.
And, mobile app, can we run this on the mobile device?
Absolutely.
Without ever connecting to the backend server? Like
You're always connecting to the backend server.
like MongoDB work locally in a mobile device?
No, you have to connect to you have to have a persistent connection. Push.
So if we run out of connection, it will.
Not this way. There's other ways of doing it. You could use a SQLite server
Yes,
on a mobile device, and you could connect to SQLite, but you wouldn't use EJS and Node. You'd use another system altogether. I recommend taking a look at React Native, which is something that you want to look.
React works with SQL.
React Native. There's
Yeah.
There's a difference between React and React Native.
React Native.
Yeah.
It works with SQL.
It can. There's basically a persistent data, right? So, anyways, let's go back to this. So you see that this is where we have our app. I put this up on GitHub. I want to deploy this on Heroku and Azure like we've done before. Same thing, right? And let's see if it works the same way. One thing we were missing, what we're really missing to put on Heroku, we're missing something, a proc file. We need that. So we're going to click away here where the yarn lock is. I'm going to put in a proc file. We need a proc file. Proc file basically tells EJ or Heroku what we need. We're going to use web, and how to launch it is node and then server.js. That's the new thing, right? Because server.js is the file that our entry point, right? So we need that proc file.
Maybe any like index.js or
Whatever your entry point happens to be. All right. So again, I'll say added proc file. These are all just commits, right, that I'm doing. And I'm going to push this up to GitHub. And once I've done that, I've got my proc file happening, and I've pushed it up. Now I'm ready to go to Heroku. Okay. So let's do it. So I'm going to go to Heroku first, and then we'll try it on Azure. So Heroku.com. And I have a Heroku account, and you can see that there's less than 12. By the way, it's all snoozing now because I haven't accessed it since last week. No one else has. And that's fine. I'm making a new Heroku app. And I'm going to put in the name. So COMP125, S2018, less than 13, right? And I'm going to click Create App. And now I have it. If I go to my GitHub here, I click GitHub. That's what I want to use for my deployment perspective. And it's going to be on Centennial. I know what the name of my thing is going to be. So it's going to be COMP125, summer 2018, less than 13. Let's see if that's there. And of course it is. Here it is. I'm going to connect it. This is all review from last week, right? So now I'm connected. I'm going to click Enable Automatic Deploy. So if I change anything, it's going to automatically redeploy. And I'm going to click Deploy Branch. And what Deploy Branch does is it's going to show me my deployment log, right? Where it says, hey, here's my engines, 10.0 and 6.1, right? It's going to resolve this. It's going to install Node, and it's going to replace NPM, because it was running 5.6 and now I'm running 6.1, right? And it's going to look down. It's going to say yarn install. It's going to do all the install pieces that it needs. Build succeeded. This is a good, really good sign when I see build succeeded. It's compressing. It's doing its thing. It's still not done. And then I see this little button that comes up. Once I see the button, chances are if I've got that, then I'm probably going to see Express Demo. Now I'm live. Now let's check the routing. So click, 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 click. I'm good. If I go right click and inspect, I can see that I've got in my console app started. So that's running on the back end. So I can do all the stuff that we've done from before. And that's how quick it is from a deployment perspective on Heroku. Nice and quick, lots of possibilities. And this is what I want you guys to do with assignment 4.
Possible to, deploy as many apps
as you saw, I can deploy as many as I want for free.
What's the limitation with GitHub?
GitHub's not a limitation. GitHub gives you free, but GitHub is limited static pages for your account, really. That's what it's for. For us, because we're moving on to more complex, we're actually creating a little server that's more complex. Let me do the same thing on Azure. Let's see if it works this time.
One more thing. Can we directly deploy it in Heroku, not in GitHub? Here, in this case, we are connecting
Yes, there's another way of doing it. You can actually have something called Heroku tool belt, which allows you to directly connect from your local files, your local Git repository, right to Heroku, no GitHub. Heroku tool belt. You can download it. It's I think it's an npm install. All right, so I'm downloading. I'm kind of going in here, and I'm going into my Heroku. Oh, sorry, my Azure. Sure. And I'm in Microsoft Azure now, and let's take a look. I made this other site. It didn't work last time. I was using Node. Right there it is. I want to make a new one. So I'm going to create a new resource. So again, I'm showing you the process, guys. And I'm going to go to web app. And I want to make this new app. So I'm going to say COMP125, S2018, lesson 13, right? That doesn't exist. I'm good. I'm going to use DreamSpark access. I'm going to use an existing resource group because I already have that. I'm going to go Canada East, right, as an example, and click Create. So this creates the container. So on Azure, it creates an empty container for me, just like it does for Heroku. This is like equivalent to me creating a I forgot to pin it. And an empty Heroku app. That's what it does. Okay, so that's the first part. So if I go back to my dashboard, right, then what we're going to see is we're going to see eventually my COMP125 lesson 13 up here as well. Well, this is, so it says succeeded. Let's pin to dashboard. Okay. And we can see that it is probably over here. There it is. By the way, I can move my stuff. I can modify my dashboard and move this stuff around and like move it over here. Sorry? I can have 10 websites. I can have 100 websites. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're both and I want to point them to the same GitHub. Okay, let's see if that works. So I'm going to click on this. This is my lesson 13, but right now it's not pointing to anything. There's nothing there, right? So if I actually was to go to this, right? If I go to here, and if I look, it's going to say there's nothing here. It's going to say there's nothing here. Your app is running, but there's nothing here, right? So now what I want to do is I want to do deployment. So I'm going to go to deployment options on Azure. I'm going to click here on choose resource. I'm choosing GitHub, just like we've done before. From GitHub, it's going to ask me, okay, so what file, what project do you want to use eventually? Eventually? Oh, yeah, it's taking time. And then I'm going to go to here, instead of my personal account, I'm going to go to Centennial. And my project, I'm going to choose the last one that I had, which is 13. Right? All the same stuff that we've done before. And then I'm going to click OK. And if I did everything right, and I may have not, this might be something that's wrong, because I told you last time I had issues with this too. Here's deployment options. I told you that if this works properly, then what we should be seeing in here, I'm just refreshing. What we should be seeing in here is that this added proc file is the thing that the last commit that I did on GitHub, which Microsoft Azure is reading, and I want a check mark in here. That's what I want. A check mark says, it looks like it's deployed properly. It's built properly on Azure. But beyond the check mark, we have to check to see if that site actually works. And typically, Express websites work a little bit better and quicker. Like it actually works on Microsoft Azure. Node is there's some trickiness around it, and it has more challenges running. So what it's doing is it's detecting what because Microsoft Azure, what's doing right now is actually creating a VM, right? And the VM is trying to detect the technology. It's saying, okay, what's the backend? Backend is Node, right? What's the front end? Front end is JavaScript, all right? And if I had a PHP, it would say backend is PHP. If it was .NET, backend is .NET, and it'll try and do all those. Yes. It does the same thing, but Heroku does it a little bit differently than. Okay, now this is good. This is a good sign. The check mark is good, but now the next part is let's see if it works, right? So again, if I click here, and if it's running properly, then we should see everything that comes here, not an error. Oh, now it works. Now this is on Azure. So now I'm using the exact same GitHub repo to power both presences, one on Azure and one on both instances, and the other one on Heroku, right? So again, let's check the routing. That's important to check. Does the routing work? Yes, it does. Okay.
Azure needs Proc File.
No. it's only for Heroku, but Azure ignores it because Azure doesn't need it. Azure just needs to know, hey, it looks at your package.json file, and it says, what's in my package.json file? What engines am I looking to load? Okay, now I'm gonna kind of do it this way. It needs an entry point for sure. The entry point has to be proper, all that stuff. But really, what you can do is you can have an Express app. So I have a server, my own server, and it's running in a VM that's specific only for this particular application, right? And by the way, it's free. I don't have to pay anything, right? And neither would you if you open up, even if you did a pay-as-you-go account with this. There's nothing to pay. There's no backend. Where you start paying is when you start doing a backend. When you have like, I'm talking about when I say backend, I mean like a database. Once you start doing a SQL database, then you start to pay. Now there is another free option, which is MLab, right? So if you're ever going to run, eventually, if you want to run the whole gamut of the whole mean stack, the other part that we've been missing up until now is something called MLab. And well, Mongo actually is what it is, right? MLab is a web-based provider for MongoDB, all right? So why is this important? Why would we do it this way? Well, because if I install Mongo locally, right, on my desktop, right, then it's only locked in. My database is like only on my computer, right? Whereas if I kind of, create MLab remotely, then I can connect to it from anywhere. So this is one option, MLab. And I'm just going to kind of copy this. And I'm going to put it on our Slack channel. Where's our Slack channel? Today it's not happening. There it is. So MLab is kind of a way, it's MongoDB hosting, like it says, database as a service, which is kind of neat. That's one option for backend. The other one that's really, really cool and important nowadays is something called Firebase, right? So this is hosted by Google. Firebase is free, right? And what you can do is you can set up a free Firebase account through Google. So now I'm mixing. I've got like Google Platform and Microsoft Azure. I'm using both those two services at the same time, right? Firebase, I have to say I recommend Firebase almost more than I do Mongo in some ways. Why? Because it's so easy to connect Firebase to mobile devices.
Firebase is also
it's serverless database. It's different. It's a serverless database. All right, so let me explain this. So if I go to my console, and again, I've set up a Firebase account. That's what I've done in the past. And you can see that I want to set up a new project. So I'm going to set up a new project. And I want to call this my project, which is going to be the name of my project, COMP125, S2018. And then here's lesson 13. That's what I want to call it. Has to be unique again. And where am I doing it? I can specify Canada. There we go. And it says use the default settings for sharing Google Analytics for Firebase data. I can uncheck this. I don't really care about Google Analytics right now. I accept controller terms. I do have to put that in if I had this up, right? And then I'm going to click continue. It says Google products and services, share Google Analytics. I don't care about that. Benchmarking, I don't care about that. Technical support, I don't care about that. Right now, it's just a demo project, right? I'm going to click on create project. And there's other ones too. So when I create my project, it creates a project that's named the same. It hasn't been connected. I want to connect, to Firebase somehow, right? Once you create your project, okay, so my project is ready. You can see that on the left, right, it gives you this really cool dashboard. So I can connect to iOS, Android, or my web app, right? Or all three, right? So this is a really great way of connecting to a serverless app for free in the beginning. Once you start wanting more performance, you're going to have to start paying, right? But from a beginning, just to start development, it's not a really bad thing to do. Notice on the left what I can do. I can do authentication with it. I can do database. I can do storage. I can do hosting. I can actually host here live on Firebase. I can do other functions. Functions is a new option that I can use, something new. There's also something called functions on Azure, and even AWS has the same thing, and machine learning, right? So there's a bunch of stuff like that I can do here with Firebase right out of the box. Again, this is Google Cloud Platform's one part of it. No, you'll see. So if I click on database, if I click on add Firebase to your web app, it's going to give me some information. It says, hey, do this. That's all I need to do to add Firebase to my web app, right? And I can literally do this even with front-end JavaScript, right? Put it together. Here's my script and my var config. Here's my API key. I shouldn't be showing you this because it's being recorded. But at the end of the day, if I had it, this little project, this is how it would be, all right? And then here's my messaging send ID, my storage bucket, all that stuff. You're going to get all this information, which is really cool. I can also check it out, like how to connect to Firebase through Node, because this is what I really want to do, right? I want to connect to Firebase through Node. So that was like one way of doing it. I can go to Docs. If I go to Docs, you can see that there are a number of ways to connect to Firebase. I can even use Unity for those people who are playing games, game creators. I can use Firebase with Unity to save my user statistics and all that kind of stuff. Android or iOS, there's different API references for different kinds of things. I can do, again, machine learning and hosting and a bunch of other stuff. And it tells you how to do all this stuff right here. And it gives you the different platforms that it supports. So for example, real-time database, it works for iOS and Android and web and C++ and whatever you want. Really, really cool. And it's kind of, it does not support C#, no. But not everything supports everything, right? So if I go to guides as an example, right? And I want to do something with database. So these are all the different things I can do, A/B testing and a bunch of really cool things with, setting up something really, really cool. So there's my real-time database. And on getting started, where the web, you can see that if I get started, it tells me how I can set it up in JavaScript, the whole details of how to do that, right? So this is where I want to connect to, and my API key, whatever it's going to be, which we saw. And there's even, most likely, a kind of a way to do that with Node. Now, I'm not going to go through this because Firebase is kind of out of scope, but I want to show you that there's a couple of other services that you can use. Now, this configuration is really what you're doing here, just like from JavaScript. You're creating an object that has different properties, an API key, and an auth domain, database URL. This database URL is specific to my project, right? And so on, right? So that's the one part, how to connect to it. But the one thing you can also do is like real time. Go back to my project for a second. Real time, what I can do is I can go in my project, and if I go to my database, right, I can actually, I can create my database here, right? Now it says there's start in locked mode or in test mode. It tells you what to do, right? I'm going to start in locked mode, right? And you can see that there gives you some examples of how to implement Firebase and how to create a Firestore and so on. I'm going to click enable. And what you can do is I can add a collection. I want you to think about a collection as a table in other databases, right? That's what a collection is. So let's say I had my users collection, or let's say we'll call it my contacts collection, right? I want to click next. And then inside my contacts collection, I have an auto ID, right? And I have my first field. Like for example, my contacts are going to have a name, as an example. And I'm also going to have inside another field, maybe I'm going to have a, so maybe I'll have first name, last name. So first name, right? So first name, last name. Then my contact will also have a contact number, right? And you can specify the type, just like you normally would. So string, string, string. It's good. I'm okay with that. I can make this a number if I want. but it's not really a number, it's a string, because contact number is not really that. So, and then maybe an email address would be good. So email address, right? And again, what the type is what you specify in here. And so that's my, in my contacts, this is my stuff. This is the way it works. So save. This is a serverless database, right? What's that? It's not relational, not at all, right? So notice that in my first contact, this is my first contact. This is how this works. I don't create fields, right? I actually have my data. This is actually my data right here, right? So if I wanted to make my contact number, whatever it was, let's say I'll put my number, 416-555-5555. I can even format it the way I want. Okay, so save, update. And I can do the same thing with my email address, tom@example.com. And my first name and my last name. Okay, update. And you can see that I have my first, this is my first document. So from a NoSQL perspective, instead of calling them tables, we call them collections. And instead of calling them records, we call them documents. Okay. Again, this is an online database, right? And I have one record or one document. Let's add another one. Let's make another one. Notice it does not give me a schema. I don't have a schema. My other record could be totally different than the other one, right? It doesn't have a relation. There is no table structure, right? You have to structure it by yourself, right? So again, I'm going to go back into my fields. We're going to call this first name, and again, my string. I'll make this like Mark. Random names here. Last name. I'm going to try and keep this the same because I want the same structure, right? No back. And let's go into contact number. And again, we'll probably put a value 416-555-5556, right? Why not? And my field, email address. And we're going to put in a value of mark@example.com, right? And I'm going to click save, right? And then that gives us two records. One record that's here and another record that's here. Notice they have different hash values for their IDs. This is the first ID. This is the second ID. Notice the hash value changes. So now I have two records, right? And this is in my database. Okay. So if I click on usage, it tells me the usage. I can set speed limits. I can go to pricing plans if I really want to pay more money. Right now it's free. I get the free version, right? I can create indices. I can create rules. As an example, like for example, right now it says allow read write, right? But I have to be logged in to the service for me to access it. It's not open to everybody, right? And that's kind of how you set up your database. Now notice it says my value is Spark, which is free, $0 per month down here. I don't pay anything for this service, right? I'm just creating a data store. And now I need to hook into it somehow, right? So again, if I go back to here, and if I go to my project settings, right, I can see that I got my web API key, right? And I can definitely set up for one of these services, right? Sometimes what we have to do, and unfortunately for this, is they have a, I want to set up Node, and Node also has some NPM, some structures for the backend to get this information, right? Like this is really for web access. Like this is like JavaScript. If I click this, it tells me this stuff, and notice there's a script tag, right? Where I have, I load up Firebase. Here's my firebase.js, right? And then there's some information that I would put in my script tag to connect. And I can do this on the front end, right? Where I can get stuff like, this connects me to, to Firebase. But I don't want this, right? I want to have something like that for Node.js. So if I say Firebase with Node.js, right? There's some really cool tutorials you can find online on how to do it. But really what you're doing is, if you look at, here's Firebase, add the Firebase admin SDK to your server. And here's prerequisites. If using admin node SDK as server running Node.js 4+, right? You can use it on Java, on Python, on a Go server, right? And it gives you the code. It says you have to npm install Firebase admin, right? So that's the stuff I have to do. I have to require Firebase, right? That's what I have to do. And then if I'm using ES2015, I can do it this way instead, right? And I can include Firebase in here. And once I've done that, here's my Node.js. I have a file. Maybe I call this my database config.js file that I add into my app.js. It kind of adds that in, right? And then I do this stuff. I put my credentials in and all that stuff. And then the database URL will be provided by Firebase, right? And then I have access to connect. This actually does the connection to Firebase, right? And once I've connected to Firebase, then what I can do is I can use the Firebase's API documentation to actually do a read. So if I wanted to do that, so I go to web. And I want to do Firebase database, right? Then I can look at some services. If I want to do the real-time database, it'll show me how to do that by going through, like literally shows me how to read, write, do a whole, the whole CRUD that's in here. Now, I'm not going to do that. It's out of scope. I just wanted to talk about it because it's such a popular front end, right? Or sorry, back end to use with your with Node and so on. Okay, so that's Firebase. That's kind of a little tour of what Firebase does for you. MLab is really cool as well. If I log into MLab, what you can do with MLab is you can see that I have several little databases. They're very small, right? Here I can make a new database. And notice that it says, hey, what's your cloud provider? Is it Google? Is it Microsoft? It doesn't really matter, right? You just choose one. You can also choose the free plan, which I recommend, or you can pay. It's not that much, actually. $15 per gigabyte. That's pretty a lot for shared, right? I'm going to click on Microsoft Azure here as my provider. Not really true. And my sandbox, which is my option for how it's going to work, right? And these are the available Azure regions, right? So West US, East US, and so on. Those are the ways we can connect to it. Click continue. And then I choose my Azure region where I want my my MLab instance to be deployed. So I can choose, like, I don't know, East US, Virginia, probably the closest to us, right? Because if we did it over here, West Coast would be like slow response time. I'm going to click continue. And I create database names. I'm going to call it the same thing. So COMP125, 2018, and lesson 13. And you can see this is free, whatever. And I'm going to click submit order. And usually they accept it. And there we go. There's my summer 2018 lesson. So if I click in there, it takes me into the database store. I have, like it said before, collections and so on. I need to create a user in this case. So I'm going to make my user. I have to have a database user for MLab. I'm going to make a user. We'll call him Tom. And the database password. Okay. I made a random password and create. All right, so there's Tom. It's my user. Read only is false, right? And once I've got this guy as an example, he is the DB owner, right? For this, I'm going to go back to collections, just like I did before with MLab and with Mongo, right? We can create a collection, so I can add a collection. Collection is like a table. I want you to think of it that way. And I'm going to call this the users collection, or the contacts. We'll call it the contacts collection. All right, here's my contacts collection. And right now I have 0 documents. Documents are records, equivalent, kind of. Right, and So now I can actually click on my contacts collection, and I can add a new record or a new document. That's what they're called, right? So I'm going to click this, add document. And now take a look. It looks like it's kind of like, you know, what looks like a JSON file, right? Because this is what Mongo looks like. Mongo looks exactly like a JSON file. So I'm going to say, I'm going to have my name. I will call it first name, first record, or my first document. And my first name is going to be Tom, right? And then I'm going to have my last name, which is going to be me again. Oh, I need a comma because it's got to be a proper JSON document equivalent. And then first name, last name, and then I'm going to have contact number. And we'll say it's 416-555-5555. And we'll say email address. It's a lot different than what you would expect from, you know, a relational database. All right. So then, if this is correct, if I did it properly, I'll click on create and go back. If I did this right, I may be missing something. Let's see what happens. Right. So there we go. There's my document. That's my record on my page. Right. And let's add another one. What I can do just to be quick is I can just do one of these. Right. And I add a new document and kind of put in the same information. Now, notice the ID got kind of added by itself. I can just remove that. It's going to be auto-added. It'll be a unique ID. We'll do the same thing we did before, like Mark Novak, just because I want to keep the same. And random names. And we'll say Mark. Documents. And I can go back. Now I have two documents, which are two records equivalent. Yay. How do I connect to it? Well, this is a little bit more complex. You need some other almost like middleware to connect to your database. So first of all, we have to know what my database, if I go back to home, and if I go back to my database name, which is this one, COMP125, S2018 lesson 13, you can see that I have connection. I have connection parameters right here. These are my connection strings to connect to my database, right? But this works through Mongo, right? So if I actually have to install Mongo, and Mongo, if I go MongoDB, MongoDB is a NoSQL database, right? Again, it's compatible with AWS, Azure, Google Platform, all the big three providers for web services, right? And what I can do is I can definitely download. So if I go to the get MongoDB, I can get it locally, right? I don't care about Atlas, but I do care about this community server, and I can download it locally for Windows. Okay. Now I've already gone and done that. When you follow your download instructions, you have to, this again, it's outside the scope of this course, but really what I can do is if I run Mongo, I'm going to bring up another command line. The way Mongo runs, it looks like this. If I type in Mongo, it actually brings me into the server itself. And it says, I'm trying to connect to the server on port 27017. The server doesn't exist. Let's run the server. Instead of Mongo, we put Mongo, the Mongo process. And now we have a server running on 27017, right? Again, you would get this after you download and install and follow the installation instructions, which I'm not going to go into. I want to run another command prompt, and then I'll run Mongo. And now you can see that I'm connected to Mongo on the back end. This is my front end connection to the Mongo server. Here it is. You can see that I've connected. I've got one connection open. And now my Mongo server is running locally, right? And I can do like a show DBS. It shows me my databases if I have any. I don't have any. If I have show collections, I can also do that. I can also switch from one server to the other, right? And if you want to know all the commands from Mongo, you can go to docs. And so I want to look at some basic commands. So this is my MongoDB Community Edition. It tells you how to install stuff, how to do installation on Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's really kind of cool. I can look at the Mongo shell, right? And you can see how the Mongo shell works, right? And how I can switch to a new database. The database would be equivalent to whatever I want. Let's make a database locally. So I'll say use COMP125 S2018. This is local. And it's lesson 13. Now I've switched to that database. The database doesn't exist until I install my app. So if I say db dot, if I want to insert a collection, so notice it says like use database. Here's use my new database, and then db dot my collection dot insert one. So I can say db dot contacts dot insert, and then the way it works is I can insert a contact that looks like with the same kind of structure that I used before up online, where I say that the name, right, is Tom. Let's say first name Tom. And I'm putting commas. I'm creating the object all in one line. Last name, me, and contact number. And the last part, which is email address. Just want to show you the difference. Apple.com. Now I'm going to close off this one and close off that one, and then press enter. And I see my right results. And if I go db.show.pretty, show.pretty, it'll show me, oops, db. I want to get collection, db.find. That's what I want. db.contacts.show. db.contacts.find pretty. There we go. So that's the actual contact inside the database, right? This database is local to my system, and it's generated an ID automatically. Notice that the ID has a weird hash. It doesn't start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like regular database, because this is a NoSQL database. There is no index for the database starting off. We do a search based on first name, last name, and stuff. How do I connect Mongo to Node? I'm just going to kind of get out of here. So I'm going to say quit. The way you do that, I'm just going to exit my server for a second. The way you do that is you need another piece of middleware called Mongoose. All right, so if I go to Mongoose, Mongoose.js is what I'm really looking for. Mongoose is this middleware that we would use to connect to the database. Okay, and so again, remember we talked about Node. Node being all component-based. We've added Express. Express gives us our switching, and it's another piece of middleware that allows us to do routing and to do a lot of other things. And then you can add other functionality to Node, to your Node server, which is Mongo, as an example, or Firebase, and there's a bunch of other ones, or you can connect using MLab or whatever. And you need Mongoose or some system of a middleware system to connect to the database. So if I was going to try and do that, if I want to try to connect to the database, you can see here's a quick start guide on how to do it, where I install Mongoose and I require Mongoose. I use this connect to connect to my local server. This is what this is, right? And now take a look at this. This connect statement is the same one that I would use here, right? So instead of connecting, this would be my actual server address. I would use all this, right? Instead of if I was going to do it remotely on MLab, right? By the way, it wouldn't matter. It would work on both Heroku and on Azure because it's just connecting to an address, right? So here it is. I need to do this, and then what I can do is I can create a connection error. It's going to specify on any error. It's going to specify a connection, but only once I want to open the database and I want to do some kind of function, if I want to, right? So let's try doing this. Let's see if I can just make a connection to the database online, right, by adding Mongoose as a middleware. Okay. Now you don't have to do this for your assignment number 4. I'm just showing you how you would connect to a database, another database online. Yeah, first we'll do it locally, and then we'll do it remotely. All right, so for us to make it work locally, again, you have to have MongoDB installed, follow the installation process. Again, I'm not going to do that with you. But if I was going to do it, I would have to start my Mongo server, MongoD. There it is. And once I've got my Mongo server, I got to keep this window open because that's my server. This is for testing. And then in my files, I'm going to go into my app.js, right? And where I install all this stuff, right, I'm going to install the other pieces to Mongo, right? So I'm going to kind of underneath logger, and because this is my routing, so this is my routing, right? Here and underneath logger, I want to install Mongoose, and I need to install it first. So I want to go into yarn. So we'll say, I'll have one. Yeah, let's add another one. I'll say that I can say yarn add, and if you notice where it says Mongoose, right? Mongoose is the middleware, Mongoose, right? And the engine node is not compatible with this module. Expected version 10. Or found incompatible module. What? That is different. Yay! I love when things break. Yarn add 4.7. The engine node is not incompatible. Is incompatible with this module. Expected version 10.00. That must be in the package.json. And I'm wondering if node version 10.00 is the problem. Yeah. Anyway, so that didn't work. But typically what you do is you go no npm install. Now, if I try to do that with npm, the problem with using npm, guys, is it'll mess up everything else I've installed with yarn. You can't use both together. It's only one or the other, right? So that's weird that it said that, validating package.json. Let's just do a yarn install and see if that's the problem. Yeah, it doesn't like the engine node. It says incompatible with expected version 10.0. And it does it twice. See what it's saying? It says less than 0.1, expected version 10.0. Is it because I have specified this for online, and I don't think I'm running this latest. I'm running a different version locally. So what is my node minus v? 10.1. Okay, let's try that. And let's try that again. Yarn install. Sorry, I just want to make sure that's correct. That's the problem. So yeah, that's the problem. So it's different than my current version. That's the problem. And again, what I could do is I can say anything greater than or equal to 10.0. Let's do that. So yarn, yarn. That would work. So now that will work with up online too. Instead of specifying a specific version, I can say anything greater than or equal to 10.00. That's my node version. And now let's try that again. I'm going to clear that up and go yarn add Mongoose, right? Which adds Mongoose. Okay, that's quite a big package, I have to be honest. And if you notice on the left when we're done, we're going to have all kinds of little files here, like 1,000 files. See? But I just added in because it's a big, very big package routing because we're adding in database connectivity, right? And then what I want to do, of course, is I want to get some code hinting, right? So I'm going to say yarn add at types. Let's just clear it up first before I do this. Yarn add at types, and then Mongoose, and then minus dev. Hopefully it'll find it. It does. Yay, that's good, right? Because Mongoose gives us some code hinting from this module, and so it added it into our dependencies. And just to be good, I'm just going to say go up on GitHub and say added Mongoose to Node. Actually, I've added Mongoose. I don't know what that says. This 1,600 files. Oh yeah, that's pretty big. And that's why we don't usually put all this stuff up on GitHub, because we don't need to. Usually, we're not using. It can just, when in the build process, Azure and Heroku, what they do is they actually build all this, so they downloaded it for us. Here, we're actually pushing it to Heroku, and it's not recommended we do it this way. You could, but you don't need to. You usually put this in a gitignore file. All right, and let's push this up to GitHub, which is going to change both websites right away, right? And then locally, what I want to do is to test is I want to create that code, right? So really quickly, I'm going to go into app.js, and down in here, I'm going to say let Mongoose equal to require Mongoose. Notice I'm getting code hinting now. This is good, right? That's the first thing I want to do. I want to kind of create a Mongoose connection, just like it says in our documentation. And I want to use this Mongoose connect to connect to my database. Now, I know that it's going to be localhost, and this is going to be the database name. So instead of test, it's going to be COMP125 S2018 lesson 13. That's my database name that I made. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say localhost, and it's going to be COMP125 S2018 lesson 13, right? So that's that part. And then when I'm connected, I want to check. I want to say that I want to create something called a DB, another object. So let DB is equal to Mongoose, right? Dot connection, right? Just like it says here. And then db.on is like saying db.addEventListener, right? And we're checking on error, on any error. If I have an error, I want to do a console.error, where I'm going to print out the console. You know, okay, that's interesting. Binding to the original console, and connection error. I can actually do it differently. I can, on db.on, I can make a little function, which is probably the way you normally see it, like this. And inside there, we can say connection error, console.log. I'll show you the connection error in a second. So that's on error, but we also want to do once, which is like add event listener, but only respond once, that we're connected. And that's all I really want to do. So I want to grab that and go over here, and we'll do a console log, you know, connected to database. Okay, so this is going to show up on our connection log. Now remember that we're actually running it here, so we're going to see if there's a problem. All right, so it says we're connecting to the server, and it says deprecation warning, current URL string parser is deprecated, and we're removing future version. To use the new parser, pass option new URL parser true to Mongo client, and so on. But look what it says here. This is what I really care about, which is connected to database. So I'm actually connected to my local database, right? All right, cool. Connect to my local database. Awesome. No functionality. I'm just connecting. I've got connectivity, right? And to show you that this is not connected, if I go back to my database window, and if I stop my database, right? Now, over here, we're going to see that there, if I refresh, if I press RS to start it again, it's going to say connection error, because we don't have a database anymore, right? So this part right here, connection error or connect to database, it checks to see whether this URL is correct, and it connects to the database this way. And to show you what it's like on NodeMon before we go, sorry, on MLab. MLab has a specific URL. So instead of using my local URL, right, I can use this one. So I can just take all this, copy, and going back to my code, I can use this one inside here as well instead of my local database, right? I can put in my code for my remote database, and I can put my username and password in here and use that one instead of this one. It'll connect the exact same way. So you can test locally, and then when you're done, you can switch your connection string to remote, and then it'll work on both Azure and Heroku, not a problem. I'm not going to push this part up because you're not going to need it, and it'll screw up our example online. So I won't push this up, but I wanted to show you that those two packages are very common, and typically without a backend, you don't have a web application. Like I'm talking about like a database, right? So that's why I'm showing you this. All right, so let's just check to see it's still working. So I want to go back to Heroku, and I want to see that my site is still working, because that would be bad if it didn't work, right? So this is still working. It updated with my latest package.json changes. And same thing with my Express website on Azure. Let's see if that still works, because that's really important for it to work too. And that still works. Okay, so that's really cool. Those are the two examples. I think that's really covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. I don't have a lab for you today because of the rain. I was delayed. I'm sorry, right? But what I want you guys to think about is all the stuff that you need for your assignment number 4, and I want to talk about that briefly. Remember that it's due next week by Wednesday, right? It's the last day of classes, Wednesday next week. We're going to be doing our exam on Wednesday. There's going to be a final test, if you want to call it that. Guaranteed there will be some parts of Node, some parts of some Ajax that I will mix and match for both things, all right? It probably won't be very big. You know, I'm probably going to, there might be 2 parts to it to make it different, because combining, I've never shown you how to combine Ajax with Node. So I might have part 1 do this, part 2 do something else. And the reason for that, this is because I don't want you guys to suffer and try and combine them into one. You've never done that. And on an exam, that's something new. And I may have these 2 parts that I ask you to do for next week. So that's going to happen on Wednesday. Tuesday, please come to class, because I'm going to be doing a review of all the stuff that's going to be on the exam, that I know that's going to be on the exam. So I'll have written the exam by that point, right, completely. So please come to class on Tuesday for a review, okay? Otherwise, guys, this is the last teaching class. I think we've gone through most of the stuff I wanted to show you with JavaScript as an intro to JavaScript. There's way more you can do than this. This is not the end, right? But it's a good start for you guys to get you guys going on the right path, I think. So hopefully we'll be able to talk more in the future, and I'll see you in other classes and all that kind of stuff. So next week, Tuesday, again, is your review, and then your final, assignment 4 is due on Wednesday. All right? Any questions before we go? Okay, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.